Okay, so here's the poem. An idea eats at me, inside, my reflection in a plate glass bar window. A suited man at an outdoor table munches in the shade of a brick cornice. He pays and walks out into a dream of ants, buildings, stories stacked high into empty air. Why do we labor boxed in our own locked glass? If Francis's dream had worked, no land wars, only a beautiful poverty. A different city, no guns, or me gritting my mandibles. A burly cop strolls, businessmen laugh over corned beef and foreign beer, self-assured as hawks. A man dripping rags holds a sandwich board. Silent Wi-Fi is controlling your mind and shuffles towards me, his hand out. I give him $1 because an idea eats at me, that the earth is a rock hotel where the killing goes on forever. God bless, he says. Either way, we'll feed each other. I love writing nature poems, and I found that if you just keep alert and your eyes open, amazing things are happening all around you. And this is about walking across a college campus in winter and witnessed one of those things. It's called Hawk, and it's very similar to Betty's wonderful Hawk poem. In fact, we said we might do an anthology of Hawk poems. Anyway, Hawk. Blood on the snow. A hawk, still as stone on frozen ground, its talons embedded in gray pigeon flesh. Its scimitar beak picks feathers so fast, a new one's in the air before the last one hits the ground. Feathers spin in their last flight, away from the pigeon's bare skin, sleek as porcelain. The hawk's work is steady as hunger, meticulous as need, understandable as my grandmother, pulling feathers off the scalded turkey by the handfuls. I step forward and the hawk flies up effortlessly into the nearest tree, dangling the dead pendulous weight of the pigeon. Perched on a low branch, it clutches the pigeon against the limb. Feathers sail down. I catch one in my hand, soft as a snowflake, curved like a talon. And the third poem is about Pittsburgh. I grew up there, and most people still think of it as Pittsburgh is a smoky old town, solid steel from McKeesport down, but that's the old folk song. But actually, it's a beautiful city surrounded by rivers and steep hills, and this poem describes my visits to Point Park, which is a park right where the three rivers meet in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh. Each stanza describes a different day that I visited, and it's called Monongahela, which is one of the rivers. 1. Holes open up in the brown river. Bubbling and gurgling, a carp sucks frothy scum. A man lives in the Fort Pitt Bridge, enclosed by girders, crawls out from a cardboard box bed. I leave food for him. 2. At 22 below zero, the coldest day on record, I step onto the ice, break off a glassy shard sharp as a gleaming spike. Inside it, elongated air bubbles blister into human shapes. They float like trapped bodies, arms splayed, legs dragged down by gravity. 3. At flood stage, a punctured oil can oozes slimy rainbows into the water among barges and dead rats. I love the bridges, but I've known people who have jumped from their thin steel-cabled girders, faces and arms disappearing beneath green waves. Thank you very much.
Our second bidder is from California, Michael Cirelli. He's the author of 4 collections of poetry, most recently The Grind, Hanging Roots Press in 2014. In 2008, he founded the National Youth Poetry Poet Laureate Program that names local and national youth poet laureates across the country. So,
this poem is called Becoming Unsingle in a Miraculous Way. Walking through the streets of Istanbul, coveting our neighbors' babies, we bought dolls for the unfertilized egg. We ate pomegranate and fish roe, slathered mayo on everything, and kept tabs on our cycle like we were puppeteers of the moon. The months came and went, and we prayed for the blood to stop. Forget all that now. Wife's full blown, ready to float away. Everything that took so long is suddenly sudden death overtime. The death of spooning, the death of the spare bedroom, the death of rational parents. What does it feel like, they ask. It feels like loss, like becoming unsingle, even if we're married. What are you thinking about? The death of sleeping in, the death of brunch, the death of surfing all day long, the death of writing, how the fishing lines hang from the galata like the underside of a piano. I'm thinking, plotting, how to pull this all off with Aya in tow. My wife's body is already dilating, quickly opening up like the mouth of a silver fish gasping for air. Soon we will be hitched, our daughter pulling us to a place that can only be described in multiples and multitudes.
okay, our third poet is Laura Grothaus. She's from Baltimore, and she's here. Laura lives in Baltimore. This past year, her work was nominated for a Pushcart. Current projects include a book of poetry and drawings and a collection of ghost stories as told by her father. Laura?
Hello. Yes, I'm from Baltimore. I did just fly in from California also. This is like the perfect end of 2 weeks of traveling on the West Coast and coming back here. So I have a few poems for you today. The first one is written in the form of a mathematical proof. I really like using forms that were not intended for poetry. So this one's called Proof. Proof of teeth is baby's gums. Proof of baby's gums is baby's mouth. Proof of baby's mouth is laugh. Proof of laugh is trust. Proof of trust is gamble. Proof of gamble is coin. Proof of coin is moon. Proof of moon is night. Proof of night is winter. Proof of winter is frost. Proof of frost is ghost. Proof of ghost is story. Proof of story is loneliness. Proof of loneliness is hunger. Proof of hunger is teeth. This next one is taken from a Irish fairy tale. Maybe you know the tale of the Selkie. It's a woman who is also a seal. The seals will come to shore and they'll take off their seal skin and become women. And in this fairy tale, you can steal a Selkie skin and then she'll come and be your wife. And there's a sailor who does this, and he hides her skin in the rafters of his house until one day she finds it and she runs back to the sea. So, the Selkie. The Selkie shed her seal skin in the ocean, peeled it off easy as a boiled tomatoes to comb her hair with human hands. Her body was seamless and silken, milk's blister, translucent with salt. Shins glistened loose light around her feet. Her hands a dark thicket. Her inky mouth gritted with laughter. I listened for her after the sound had stopped. All seals took on a glow. Black butter eyes allured, an aquarium smell enticed. The Selkie knew what kind of girls watch the sea like that. Let the rocks bite their toes. Girls who had learned sweetness to get by, who wore out their nights with apologies. So this was not the story of a fisherman locking a seal's skin in a chest. This was revision like the shore is revised. Sand transcribed by tide, woman into seal into woman. She let me stroke the faint whiskers above her lips, her dappled spine, rough knees, hair like oil slick. My feet tangled with kelp, my hands in the foam at her hips. Waves slurred against our chest, briny and whining. The tide caught in our mouths, did not stop rising. And the final poem that I have for you today, in the summers I do a backpacking trip. I lead teenagers on a backpacking trip, so this is a poem about climbing mountains. What you remember of the rock. Dark, dank, dizzying girl, come out of the water, come out of the moss. Trick-tongued girl, wily and riled girl, girl of white branch, of speckled bark, girl with tender boughs, with thunder gloves, with jade in her eyes, stone girl, itching with flies. Girl who has forgotten all she was. Remember, you sat on a rock and saw the purple world all around you. Mountains in every direction, ruddy laurel pinpricked pink, pools of resting water, flecked black with tadpoles. You dipped your finger in. This is important. Remember you were there to watch the world slide into blue, and it was not easy to climb up. Your heart in your stomach, how hard the stone was, girl with raw feet, sappy, sore, and oozing girl, swarm of limbs, gentling yourself through your own thoughts, jamming foot after foot into crag, straight up. You climbed and did not stop until all around you was the wide world, gnarled and waiting, only half waiting. You must remember the way it didn't even move, didn't even look up, so certain you would make it. Thank you. It's an honor to be here also. Thank you, everyone.
Our next winner is from Sri Lanka. Rashta Rafiq is currently based in Sri Lanka, of course. Her work has appeared in numerous journals, including a Pushkar Prize nomination and shortlisted for the Vasafiri New Writing Prize in 2017.
Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Nazim Hikmet Poetry Festival Committee for choosing my poems as one of the winning entries of the 2018 contest. Thank you so much. This means a lot to me as a poet who is currently working on her first collection. So, I'm a poet from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an island just below India. This is for those of you who have no idea where I'm from. And that's also the reason why I am not present at the event today. So I was asked to read a poem, and the poem that I am choosing to recite today is actually very, very close to me. Last April I traveled to Palestine and I spoke about a lot of things, and mainly on the Palestinian families and the struggles that they undergo since the establishment of Israel. So the title of this poem actually means Yerihain Canaanite, which translates to City of the Moon in English. So here it goes. City of the Moon, Hattin, Palestine, 2017. Yasmamaya salams the air of a city mountain. City of the Moon, evocated hot and full of Janazah domes. I watch you pull down heaven, full with children. 30 miles of rocket launch, 30 miles of refugee camps, 30 miles of Yatanga lost in the main, torn to shreds before they reached her. The way you tell this, Russell's sleepless nights of love and cuffs, sensuous guilt, silence after silence, her lips pink with season. One day, God handed olives to a field she had worked in, away from Nemesis, Rogol Heli, there you switch. Behind your habit you rode the wind of Intifada there. Halfway on the other side, heli troops arrived on their knees. Homeless homes, parting the bucket over you, angeling, will it sound. Thank you and see you.
Okay, our next poet is Anya Russian. She's from Greensboro, North Carolina. Anya is a creative nomad who has lived and traveled in 11 countries and speaks 3 languages. She has a natural tendency to reinvent herself. Trained in classical and contemporary dance, Anya has performed on stages worldwide and collaborated with artists of diverse disciplines. She has also slept on dirt floors and survived altitude sickness while backpacking solo through Asia for 8 months. Anya is intrigued by the space between people, languages, cultures, and landscapes, and the infinite ways we try to span it. You may find her translating poetry from the Spanish language, working with the immigrant and refugee community, stretching outside on a sunny day, rock climbing, or writing poetry, which distills her lesser-known penchant for the simple things that matter most in life. I will add that she's a second-time winner. So, Anya?
I'll add to the collective thanks and gratitude for the opportunity to be here today. And what a gift to be able to hear so much wonderful verse on this beautiful spring afternoon. As was mentioned already, I've done a lot of traveling, and my travels have prompted much of my poetry writing. But I like to think that each poem could really be anywhere and any place. This first poem is called In Memoriam. Here on the edge of town, where civilization grits her teeth, we squirm as if caught for the first time in an indecent act. The wildflowers quiver a string of hints across the lap. The bamboo trees creak an eerie recollection from their long-stalked throats. In the clutch and release of the butterfly's wings, the stroke of a brush against paper. An elemental gesture reminds of the petal of youth still intact. Even the mountains that brood for months over the city's stubborn factory seem nearly reachable now, folded nicely like the pleats of a skirt. Thank the orange-rimmed clouds for sealing this hour so frail in flight, in ponds where rice breeds next to roadsides for the next season, startling the landscape with chartreuse notes. Envy that force of intrusion, like a day's wide-brimmed hat tipped towards you, or an old yearning restored. Some memories remain pure as the question in the doe's round eyes, resolute as a gun barrel aimed at the heart. My second poem is called In the Lagoon. Silverfish give arrow to the unsung horizon. It could be a flock of sparrows, single file against the frigid cold. How it protects its contraband, the invisible temptation to flee. Today nothing can be seen, only the fledged pieces of a tarnished profile. A makeshift pier, no longer worth the wind's rebuke, quakes lightly, like a turtle surfacing news of a place far beyond grass. Ask the mangroves of their labor. They extract but a tangled reflection from the water's jester, too humble or too bold to defy Archimedes. A body inside a body, which one contains the other? The moon's stark shudder will not halt the fisherman's vaults, churned by the same livid alphabet that crafts the night's braille, and the red pulse of a lone boat gives stark note to what unseen is no less stealthy. Who knows the moral of the story? Too many have chased too long after that kite, having forgotten the urge to run is what we hold on to. So the horizon is a clean break, or more like a palimpsest, as the broken sand sinks again, recollecting its armor, the shattered efforts of hours washed ashore, small deaths whose pocket-sized irony you will never fully grasp. Today, nothing can be seen. The sprite grasses whistle of an intimate fire, and the sea reads as silk, unafraid of its seams, as a heron watches suspiciously, its white resolute against the slow, tugging testimony beneath. It watches me, who knows nothing, but calls it calm. And my last poem is titled Geography Lessons. Wednesday, the sky raised down to a bare blue scrim, the leaves hardly a rumor of fall. A bell tower scolds, pleading the summer's drone, a bell tower scolds, and even the insects grow persuasive. The ear attempts to find the rail between sound and warning, to pry the iron brow with a honeysuckle's jest. But a widowed note will multiply into thousands, like the scaffold of dew that lingers on the brittle grass still unmasked by the sun's portrait. It bows like the present tense, adhering to an ephemeral alphabet. The sky knows better the price of waking, the murals that slip in and out of grass, each day redeeming this somnambulant town, giving ode to the brick altars of its universities and shrillness to the quaint suburbs, capturing leisurely faces and hopeful storefronts, the still life in backyards. Plastic ducks, hedges allow their rightful rebellion, and wind chimes that waken empty porches preoccupied with a beer can, where familiar flags, like the kudzu, survey how much lightness can be held in reach. The sky knows better the price of waking, the million ways to retreat with runners along railroad tracks that still spite the city's shuffling hours into dark and light, the same old story trading hands. But the summer is content with the firefly's ventriloquy, the azure of arrested verses. The sun is just a mime, threading yesterday's ink through this one. Even the blue jay carries on in brass solitude, cajoling the old oak trees reconciled to shadows. The bell tower scolds, and even the sidewalk surrenders. People retire into circuitous geometries, leaving a trail of lost gestures, a question to write oneself through. Now imagine the pearl's solidarity, bred within a shell's ward, for years never once rattled by tide or tempted by the mirror of a bloodshot dusk, never once craning for the earnest slope of a neck or to shed its chapel for the salt-tinged thrills of a thespian wind. Maybe that is wisdom, a solemn pact with oneself, a language with no proof or logic but the sun's gambled revelations, the hour's rhyme that carves a rift between destination and reason and the mind's lonely atlas. Thank you.
Our sixth and last winner of the year is Dima Shahabi. She's from California. She's the author of 13 Departures from the Moon, co-author of Diaspo Renga with Marilyn Hecker, and co-editor with Bob Beausoleil of Al Mutanabbi Street Starts Here, for which she received the NCBR Book Recognition Award. Her work has been widely published in anthologies and literary journals.
Greetings to everyone at the Nazim Hikmat Poetry Festival. It's such a pleasure to be with you today, even though I really wanted to be with you in person. I'm so sorry I could not be there. I'd like to begin with a ghazal, which is called A Lover's Quarrel with the World. And the next two poems are sort of dedicated to friendships that are unforgettable friendships. So this one is Ghazal, A Lover's Quarrel with the World. History gallops over the margins of your page. What's a story, but it's plural all over the world? Arabic lulls ageless in your ears, but to you, what most matters is temporal in this world. The sheikh with a gold pen in his pocket, the girl lathering her father's head with musk, and you hurling over Whitman's poems, all have a lover's quarrel with the world. A riddle of childhood loss soaks the rearview mirror in an Arizona desert, and you drive past the unsaid, but ignite nothing immoral in this world. When you put your head down to grass to gaze at the fallen sparrow, your eyes met rest in its body, and what's silent became oral in the world. The child, splintered with too many voices, hears only yours, and her paths, dismantled of sound, light up murals of this world. A sweet theft, a heavy hour of grief, and a ghazal posturing for friendships that never fade, vine-leafed gardens in which we hide against the perils of this world. Her face is a balm against fracture. The light on her moon is a cheek you return to, and you say, time has no stride against her flushed lips, flickering corals of this world. How else to bundle this dark where pillow meets dream, and the one acquainted with the night rises like an immortal of this world? It's really interesting, Robert Frost makes his way into two of these poems. This one is called Robert Frost at the Alumni Garden. October's stealth light leavens the skin, then molts into Nural oaks. No preamble to a scream interrupts the glistening rub of downward wings, except for the hum of poets acquainted with one another. The one made of bronze cools the day's fire from their breaths, so that news of faraway places lifts briefly. And in this afternoon, there are no bodies scraped from deformed fans in Kashmir, nor children gushing out of cemented pipes in Gaza. For a small wrinkle, the women of Tahrir caress dragonflies with their fingertips and flood the tank's long arm with bracelets of jasmine. The fluted fountain in the courtyard is only an ode to timelessness, but not shadows, as we elide over an inscription with a watchman in it. Thank you so much for listening.
Every year, as part of the I don't want to move too fast. I want